Some fish are a good food source, while a few may be unhealthy. It's important to take enough omega-3 fatty acids, and certain fish can provide them. However, due to factors like mining, sewage, and fossil fuel wastes, heavy metals such as mercury get up in the water and accumulate in our fish. Sadly, low-level mercury poisoning from polluted seafood is a deep concern that can have disastrous health consequences. Let's look at the top 12 unhealthy fish you should never eat. Number 1. Tilapia. Tilapia is a farmed fish, and eating it leads to highly inflammatory diets, thus being even worse than bacon. Still, tilapia is one of the most consumed fish in America. This fish has very little omega-3 fatty acids, but very high levels of omega-6 fatty acids, meaning the natural benefits of tilapia will not increase your omega-3s. Low omega-3 combined with high omega-6 levels is dangerous for people struggling with asthma, heart disease, arthritis, and other autoimmune and allergic disease symptoms that are vulnerable to inflammation. The inflammation that this fish causes can damage your blood vessels, your heart, skin, lung and joint tissues, and your digestive tract. Number 2. King mackerel. Because of high mercury and methylmercury level, this is one of the types of fish that children and pregnant women should not consume. Mackerel contains healthy omega-3 fatty acid. However, certain types of this kind of fish could be too much for you in the essence that they contain too much mercury. The Food and Drug Administration is warning children and women to stay away from king mackerel because it has been discovered to contain elevated levels of mercury. Number 3. Orange roughy. Orange roughy has been so overfished that many restaurant chains still refuse to serve it. Further, it tends to be high in mercury levels. It is a long-lived fish that takes 10 to 20 years to reach maturity, which means populations take a long time to recover, and fish tend to accumulate toxins like mercury of lengthy time periods. Even if you see orange roughy for sale or labeled as sustainably harvested, avoid it. Number 4. Swordfish. It contains high amounts of mercury. Therefore, pregnant women and children should not consume this type of fish. Men can eat it once in a month. When it comes to swordfish, the main thing that forbids eating them is the elevated levels of mercury inside them. Mercury in swordfish is so high that Environmental Defense Fund recommends children and women to avoid it altogether. As for men, they recommend eating just one serving per month. Number 5. Shark. Sharks are often found on lists of fish you shouldn't eat for several reasons. First, sharks stand high on the food chain because they are considered to be the kings of the sea. Being higher on the food chain translates in having higher mercury levels in them. You should stay away from foods that contain mercury because they are toxic. Second, sharks are very slow to sexually mature. Plus, they don't give birth to many offspring, and therefore they are tragically depleted. Sharks are also being discarded as waste by swordfish and tuna fishers. Number 6. Eel. Served in sushi, this type of fish is on the avoid list because it is poisonous. It contains a high level of mercury, a heavy metal, and PCBs, chemicals. An eel is also called unagi on many sushi menus. It matures slowly, and it is being overfished, putting it in danger of collapse. The great desire for this type of fish leads to even Asian countries to look for American eels that are in great danger because it can go extinct. Sadly, if it disappears, it will lead to a disaster since eels are very important for protecting our water supplies. For instance, in Delaware River, eels are a vital part of spreading the mussel populations, who serve as natural filters of water. Apart from overfishing problems, eels store and absorb contaminants such as endocrine disruptors like flame retardants and PCBs. They can be very contaminated, so an adult person is being advised to eat no more than one eel per year. Number 7. Grouper. Grouper is a type of fish that is always found on the list of food you should never eat because of its very high mercury levels. Grouper is also being often targeted at seafood fraud. One 2015 investigation discovered that more than a third of 19 Atlanta restaurants were selling Pangasius, the filthy Vietnamese catfish, as grouper. The tests also showed that the grouper that was being sold is actually whitefin weakfish or king mackerel that are cheaper alternatives. Finally, this kind of fish is extremely vulnerable to overfishing, and therefore is advised to not consume it and take a pass whenever they see it listed on a menu. Number 8. Tilefish. When it comes to mercury concentration, tilefish join the ranks of the worst fish to eat. They make their home in the deep waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic coast of the U.S. and are considered by some to be a delicacy. Bioaccumulation causes high mercury levels in tilefish, as it does in king mackerel and other large predatory fish. Human activities, such as industrial pollution and mining, are the primary sources of mercury found in the water, which is ingested by plankton and larger fish. The FDA recommends that young children, women who are or may become pregnant, and nursing mothers avoid eating tilefish. Number 9. Imported farm shrimp. Is shrimp good for you? When it comes to farmed shrimp, which accounts for about 90% of the shrimp we consume, the answer is a resounding no. In 2009, Italian researchers discovered that 4-hexylresorcinol, a food additive used to prevent discoloration in shrimp, could reduce sperm count in men and increase breast cancer risk in women. Not only that, but all one of the pesticides used globally in shrimp production are banned for use in U.S. shrimp farms. Shrimp farm ponds are also treated with harmful chemicals and pesticides, such as malachite green, rotenone, and organotin compounds, all of which can have detrimental effects on health. Number 10. Farmed salmon. Americans consume a lot of salmon. Unfortunately, the majority is the unhealthiest kind. In fact, most salmon marketed as Atlantic salmon is farmed, meaning that fish are raised in conditions often ridden with pesticides, feces, bacteria, and parasites. What's more, studies show that farmed salmon is more likely to contain harmful contaminants, like PCBs, which are pollutants linked to insulin resistance, obesity, cancer, and stroke. They're also often treated with antibiotics and tend to be higher in inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids. Number 11. Atlantic cod. Because of heavy fishing, this type of fish is on the list of endangered species. Atlantic cod is a fish species discovered to be vital to feeding the early colonization of the Caribbean Sea. However, the heavy fishing over the last 1,000 years made this fish extinct. Even though the female releases more than 100 million eggs, only a few can survive. If you are a big fan of cod liver oil, be sure it doesn't come from Atlantic cod. Instead, make sure the cod source is coming from Alaskan cod caught with a jig, pot, or long line because the regular one can contain high levels of mercury. Sadly, poisoning from low-level mercury found in contaminated seafood may have disastrous effects, especially when it comes to a developing fetus. Also, mercury affects the heart of adults in a bad way, intensifying the risk of hypertension and heart attacks. Number 12. Imported king crab. About 75% of king crab sold in the U.S. is imported from Russia, where unsustainable fishing practices are common. Although Alaskan king crab legs legally can only be called that if they're harvested from Alaska, widespread mislabeling is the norm. For instance, many red king crabs caught in Russia under questionable practices are marketed as Alaskan king crab legs. Because you should avoid imported king crab at all costs, it's important to be completely sure of where those crab legs came from before you order them. If the label makes claims like imported and Alaskan, something is clearly wrong. You can also check out Seafood Watch's complete crab recommendations for more info.